Ryan Russell, the author of Centering Prayer. Sitting quietly in God's presence can change your life. And what you're listening to is the teaching time that Rich Lewis, who's the author of Sitting with God, and I presented on Saturday, December 16th. And the topic this month is Centering Prayer and the Elimination of Hurry. I think this is one of the best teaching times that Rich and I have done together. I hope you enjoy it. You're going to hear quotations from Dallas Willard, from Scripture, from Dietrich Bonhoeffer. Rich and I think take a deep dive into how contemplative practices, essentially, in the words of one of my mentors, teach us to show up, pay attention, and recognize that when we do have focused intentionality, God shows up and always is more invested in what we're doing than even we are. If you'd like to be invited to future gatherings, you can sign up at centeringprayerbook.com. That's my email list, or visit Rich's site, silenceteaches.com, to sign up with Rich, or better yet, sign up with both of us, as we love to share helpful content to help you grow in your love for God and neighbor. And welcome. And this month we're talking about centering prayer and the elimination of hurry. And Rich, we will start with your reflection.
Sure. And obviously, whatever your practice is, we thought it would be fun to talk about, the elimination of hurry and slowing down, and what does that mean, and what really happens. So some of my initial thoughts are, a contemplative practice slows you down, and that's a good thing. and a lot of things happen as a result, fruits of your practice. You become more present. You become one with God. Our small mind and heart merges with the larger mind and heart during our practice. And we get to tap into some wonderful inner resources, the divine within. We get to tap into this. And then obviously outside of our practices, the fruits come with us. That I think we're better able to hone in on the present moment and what it requires of us, and maybe even tasks we're doing suddenly don't seem as complicated because maybe we overcomplicated them. And I'll notice that, because I do a second sit during my workday, and I might be struggling with a task, but I'll take my sit, and then in the afternoon, I'm looking at the task and realizing it wasn't really as bad as I thought it was, and I overcomplicated it. So my contemplative practices helps me let go of the overcomplication, or lets me let go of all the details that I attach to things that aren't necessary. I think we have more aha moments because of our contemplative practices. We're better able to calm ourselves down when we face challenges and struggles in life. We begin to have more confidence and believe I can handle it. And that's kind of a mantra I like to say to myself from time to time when I see an issue is, I can handle this. I try to say to myself and make myself believe it. So just a lot of neat things happen with slowing down, better listening and watching. Maybe we're better becoming a sponge and soaking in what we need for the present moment. So those are some initial reflections when you slow down. What I notice outside of my practices, as I reflect, on my life. I'll turn it over to you, Brian.
Yeah, and I'm going to share a couple of quotes today, and we're going to go back and forth for those of you who are new a few different times. And I'm going to start with a couple of quotations that I have found really meaningful in my life. The first one, I'm unsure of who this comes from. It seems like it's some kind of paraphrase of something that Dallas Willard probably said, but it's unknown. It's like one of my mentors shared it with me, but it's just a principle about busyness and also hurry. And it's busyness is a matter of the calendar. Hurry is a matter of the soul. And we all know kind of how that feels. And I'll put that one in the chat, and then I'm going to have an extended passage. And this next passage actually is a longer quotation from Dallas Willard. If you're not familiar with Dallas Willard, he's he's deceased now. He was a philosopher. He wrote a number of excellent books on spiritual formation. They're real deep dives, but worth your time if you're not familiar with it. Dallas Willard, and this is a little piece of one of of his books. He's talking about hurry, and just see how this kind of lands for you even now as we've kind of gathered to not hurry today. Hurry is the great enemy of the spiritual life in our day. And and it's interesting, he wrote that a long time ago too. It's not like 2023, this is like 20 years ago or longer he wrote this. So hurry is the great enemy of the spiritual life in our day. You must ruthlessly eliminate hurry from your life. There is nothing else. And so, when you kind of see how that lands, this idea of hurry, and do you feel hurried? Maybe were you even hurried getting here today? We have some of my seminary students are here, and we've been quite busy and sometimes hurried during the semester, and just kind of assess where that is. And a question that I like to use for myself, because I've spent way too much of my life not only being too busy, but in a hurry. And I will say that centering prayer has tremendously benefited me just showing up. Those that would have known me, like I used to be the professor in the classroom that showed up 5 seconds before the class started and disappeared like Speedy Gonzalez 1 second after the class was over, and ran back to my office, and hardly ever talked to anybody. And it wasn't that I didn't like people, it was that I was too busy. So I was always in a hurry, and hurry is that feeling. If you think about it, what is hurry from? It's you're worrying about the next thing that you have to do instead of showing up fully for the place that God has brought us to in the present moment. And all the contemplative stuff that we do is trying to pull us back into the present, so we're not like locked in the past in a memory or projecting on what we're going to do the rest of the day. So a question you might ask yourself is, are you tolerating hurry in your life, or how does hurry show up in your life today? Rich?
That was great. Reflect a little bit on and journaling, is another great way just to eliminate hurry. And I'll share. I have a spiritual director that I've been seeing for 3 months now. But prior to COVID, I had this wonderful nun that I saw, and then she retired, and then I kind of stepped away from it. But I decided I really would like someone to talk with. So I was sharing with him this last month. I read from a meditation that I read, and these words struck to me. They were, I've come to set the earth on fire, were words that struck me. So he challenged me, write it down, and not right now, and just spend some time jotting down what that means to you. So thought I'd share what it means to me, and obviously it could mean different things to you. But I did take the time, as he said, to jot down, well, what does that mean? Because if you think about journaling, it's just a great way to slow down, think, gain the inner wisdom, reflect, plan, and me including, often just I don't take enough time to do this. I'm always in a hurry to do things, as Brian's saying, instead of slowing down and just thinking through things, planning things, or just trying to reflect on things. So as I wrote down a couple sentences that I'll share. When Jesus said to his disciples, "I've come to set the earth on fire," why did that strike me so much? And what did it mean to me? So I'll share, I said, I want to be on fire for God. I want to love God, love myself, and love others. I want to serve others with the gifts God has infused in me. I want to become one with God. I want my actions to be infused by the Spirit. I want to love and serve someone who is alone and feels helpless. I want to trust God even if it moves me out of my comfort zone. And then I just talked about, like, the book I published moved me out of my comfort zone. My movement to a new job in July moved me out of my comfort zone. And then I just threw out questions to God. What do you want me to do I'm at Empower right now as my new company. What do you want me to do there? And what do you want me to do? What other work do you want me to do with my website? How can I better serve my wife, children, family, and friends? So that whole verse kind of set me on fire for thinking through things. So I would just challenge you to slow down your hurry. And if something strikes you, take some time, some quiet time, and think about whatever that thing was that struck you, and reflect upon it. I'll turn it over to you, Brian.
Yeah, and for my next two pieces, I'm going to share a couple of different sections from a really helpful book by Dietrich Bonhoeffer. Some of you've probably seen it's called Life Together. This was the kind of communal rule of life that Bonhoeffer put together. Those of you who don't know his story, he was part of the underground church that resisted the Nazis in Germany. So they had to like basically create a seminary that was secret. He ends up being arrested and ultimately, you could say martyred actually during World War II. He's killed by the Nazis. But this is a wonderful book about spiritual formation with one another. And this is page 88 of the book. It's a section where he's talking about solitude and the day alone. And the preceding pages, he's actually specifically talked about doing silent meditative prayer, regular prayer, and intercession. And then he ends with this interesting section. I'm going to read a couple of paragraphs called The Test of Meditation. It's the test. Every day brings to the Christian many hours in which he will be alone in an unchristian environment. These are the times of testing. This is the true test of meditation in true Christian community. Has the fellowship served to make the individual free, strong, and mature, or has it made him weak and dependent? Has it taken him by the hand for a while in order that he may learn again to walk by himself, or has it made him uneasy and unsure? This is one of the most searching and critical questions that can be put to any Christian fellowship. And I was going to speak specifically about having spent time in like contemplative prayer. Furthermore, this going out into the world is the place where we find out whether the Christian's meditation has led him into the unreal, from which he awakens in terror when he returns to the workaday world, or whether it has led him into real contact with God, from which he emerges strengthened and purified. Has it transported him for a moment into a spiritual ecstasy that vanishes when everyday life returns, or has it lodged the word of God so securely and deeply in his or her heart that it holds and fortifies him, impelling him to active love, to obedience, to good works? Only the day can decide. I really like that. Is thinking about the fruits, and as we think about kind of eliminating hurry, we spend time with God. We kind of breathe that in, so then we can then breathe it out in our engagement with the world around us. So, Rich, do you have another share, and then I'll read a little bit more Bonhoeffer.
Sure. We need these practices, whatever they are, whether it's Christian meditation or centering prayer or journaling or walking or Lectio Divina or a prayer labyrinth. They slow us down and help us hear the voice of God within. And often this voice comes as an inner nudge, to do something, move in a new direction, help someone, or an assurance to us that all will be okay. But if we don't slow down, we miss these vital inner nudges from God, and maybe we move in the wrong direction, or we miss an opportunity to help someone, or we panic when we don't need to panic. So that's all. I would just challenge you and encourage you, including myself, to continuously slow down so that we can hear, the inner voice of God and move forward with really the right actions. And I like to compliment. I've been talking a lot about journaling. I like to complement my practice with journaling, because I think I sit with God and God prays in me, and then outside of my centering prayer practice, I'm journaling what has God prayed in me, what actions does God want me to take. So they go well. They complement each other. I sit with God, God prays in me, and then my journaling is me writing what do I think God has spoken to me in my centering prayer sit. So I need both practices, and I just encourage you to find practices that work with you, where you can hear the inner nudge of God, and then you can figure out what that inner nudge is and then move forward and take action on it.
No, thank you, Rich. I'll just echo Rich. As a matter of fact, I actually even have my journal sitting right here from today. So that is my journal. I journal every morning, every night. Centering prayer is my first thing I do in the morning. I do some centering prayer throughout the day. On the weekends, I do extra. So this will be like, not to brag, but like on Saturday mornings, this will be my third sit, the one that we're going to do together, because I really just try to completely decompress on weekends so that I'm ready for what God has for me when I engage in my work during the regular week. I want to read from Bonhoeffer, and this is another great passage, and it's one of my all-time favorite things that he says. He talks. It's in a section that's called the ministry of helpfulness, but you could also call it the ministry of interruption. So, and when we talk about being in a hurry, one of the things that's really hard is it's hard to be interrupted. So he's giving a list of things that he hopes the pastors that he's training will be involved in. And he says the second service that one should perform for another in Christian community is that of active helpfulness. This means initially simple assistance in trifling external matters. There is a multitude of these things wherever people live together. Nobody is too good for the meanest service. One who worries about the loss of time that such petty outward acts of helpfulness entail is usually taking the importance of his own career too seriously. And I've always loved this next passage. We must be ready to allow ourselves to be interrupted by God. God will be constantly crossing our paths and canceling our plans by sending us people with claims and petitions. We may pass them by, preoccupied with our more important tasks, as the priest passed by the man who had fallen among thieves, perhaps even while we're reading the Bible. When we do that, we pass by the visible sign of the cross raised athwart our path to show us that not our way, but God's way must be done. It is a strange fact that Christians and even ministers frequently consider their work so important and urgent that they will allow nothing to disturb them. They think that they're doing God a service in this, but actually they are disdaining God's crooked yet straight path. They do not want a life that is crossed and balked, but it is part of the discipline of humility that we must not spare our hand where it can perform a service, and that we do not assume that our schedule is our own to manage, but allow it to be arranged by God. In the monastery, his vow of obedience to the abbot deprives the monk of the right to dispose of his own time. In evangelical community life, free service to one's brother takes the place of the vow. Only where hands are not too good for deeds of love and mercy and everyday helpfulness can the mouth joyfully and convincingly proclaim the message of God's love and mercy. Again, just a good reminder of that ripened life that solitude prepares us for, so that we can be interrupted, right? Just kind of like Jesus. You ever notice Jesus just walks around and did cool stuff because he was okay being interrupted by somebody, whether from a woman who just touches his garment to a blind Bartimaeus who's crying out for help, to Zacchaeus who's up in a tree. I mean, just think about all the ways, all the coolest stuff about Jesus was he was okay being interrupted. I got one more, Rich. Do you have another one?
Okay. No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, no, go. No, you can go first, and then I'll just share mine and do the.
No, I mean, I'm good. I'm good.
Oh, okay. Yeah, let me just close then. I wanted to end with a passage of scripture, and this is a very familiar passage, and we've even talked about it in previous gatherings, but I just think it's so important. It's just a fundamental text that contemplatives have always gone back to, and this is the familiar story of Mary and Martha from Luke's Gospel, chapter 10, verses 38 to 42. It's going to talk about that one thing. Now, as they went on their way, he entered a certain village where a woman named Martha welcomed him into her house. She had a sister named Mary who sat at the Lord's feet and listened to what he was saying. But Martha was distracted by her many tasks, so she came to him and asked, "Lord, do you not care that my sister has left me to do all the work by myself? Tell her then to help me." But the Lord answered her, "Martha, Martha, you're worried and distracted by many things. There is need of only one thing. Mary has chosen the better part, which will not be taken away from her." And if do some reading from medieval sources and even modern sources, the Mary Martha, it's not a dichotomy. It's about merging these two pieces together. But the deepest principle is Mary knows the one thing, and that one thing then opens up everything, because there's our thing and work to be done. But we get the one thing right, and that's what the silence does. And so as we think about eliminating hurry or busyness, enjoy the 20 minutes of silence and solitude that we're going to do in community together as as a opportunity then to open ourselves and prepare ourselves for the interruptions and the work that will be there when we finish our time together today. And at this time, I guess we will go into our sit. I'm going to turn it back over to Rich. And for those of you who aren't experienced with centering prayer, Rich has some simple instructions. And of course, if you have other sort of contemplative prayer practices that you use other than the centering prayer technique, feel free, of course, just do what you're accustomed to doing. But Rich, why don't you give us some instructions and we will get started.
So for those that, as Brian said, please, take this 20 minutes, however you take your time. But if you don't have a practice, this is a practice that Brian and I do called centering prayer. So I'll quickly describe how to do it, and then I'll lead us into the silence. As 4 guidelines, choose a sacred word as a symbol of your intention to consent to God's presence and action within. And you can pick a word, usually 1 or 2 syllables. Love, ocean, Jesus, a color, a beach, and then sitting comfortably with your eyes closed, settle briefly into the silence and introduce interiorly this word. And it's really just a symbol of your consent to God's presence and action within. And then as you're sitting there in silence, when you become engaging with your thoughts, meaning instead of sitting with God, you're sitting with your thoughts, you're planning, you're plotting, you're wondering what you're going to do after you get up from your sit. You return interiorly to this word to come back to the purpose of your sit, of sitting with God, and let go of your engaged thoughts. And you just use the sacred word when needed, not as a mantra. But there are mantra practices. Centering prayer just happens to not be a mantra-based practice. And then at the end of the prayer time, you can choose to sit in silence for a minute or two, just to kind of reacclimate yourself to the world. So that's how you do the practice.